Since it is Pixar week, there was a Pixar movie that has hit theaters. It was in theaters for about a week until everything just kind of went downhill. That, of course, is Onward. Now, yes, there is another Disney Pixar slated for the end of the year called Soul. I haven't found anything on whether or not it's delayed. And as far as I know, it's most likely going to end up being delayed. But as states are starting to reopen, my hopes that we can get back into the theaters soon. Probably operating, with social distancing, of course. Um, but that's my hope anyway, because I really was excited for Soul. This one, a little bit. I was excited for it a little bit, based off of a few things, but let's just talk about some of these. First off, it's directed by Dan Scanlon. I don't know of anything else he's done. I apparently didn't look it up. Let's see. Oh. So he directed Monsters University, which relates to this, and he was a storyboard artist on Little Mermaid 2, Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, 101 Dalmatians 2, Tarzan 2, and Cars. He also was a writer for Mater and the Ghostlight and co-director for that, which is like it was a kind of like a Pixar short that came on the Cars DVD, and was a part of the animation department for Pocahontas 2. So, interesting stuff right there. It's from 2020, as we've talked about, and it's an animated fantasy adventure starring Tom Holland as Ian Lightfoot, Chris Pratt as Barley Lightfoot, who, of course, you know both of those names from the MCU. Chris Pratt plays Star-Lord, and Tom Holland plays Spider-Man. You already knew that, though, if you're here. I don't know why I did that wink. I think my eye twitched a little bit. Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Laurel Lightfoot. She, of course, was in Seinfeld. Octavia Spencer as the Manticore. If you know, basically any movie, The Help she's in Ma. She is everywhere. She plays the Manticore. I love Octavia Spencer. Mel Rodriguez as Colt Bronco, and Kyle Bornheimer as Wilden Lightfoot, the father. He's not a major role in the movie, but he is still there. Has an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, and off of a budget of $200 million. Sadly, it only made $103.2 million at the box office. Obviously, that's because of the shutdown. When coronavirus came about, obviously everything shut down. Theaters were the first thing to go. So, thankfully, Disney decided that, hey, you know what? We made some money. Let's just put it on Disney Plus as a gift to our fans. And they did that with Frozen 2 after, of course, it had its time in the theaters. But the biggest thing was, hey, we know all of you people are going to be stuck in with little kids. Here's a movie that you may not have taken them to see because either they're too young for the theaters or you just really don't take your kids to the theaters for whatever reason. Here you go. It's now at home for you to have for $6 a month. I honestly have to give Disney a lot of credit for that. They could have just as well had said, nah, we didn't make our money off of it. But they made some, and they took a chance. Obviously, I'm reading this from a previously reviewed thing. I don't remember what day specifically. Unfortunately, the Google does still have it at 103.2 billion, or million, sorry. So there's no update on that. Sadly, this also is probably the last 2020 film. I will see. I didn't see it in theaters. I kind of was on that group that was like, it's probably going to be on Disney Plus at some point. And obviously it came out, so I was like, well, I'd be foolish not to watch it and get a review out for it. I'm glad I did. I did enjoy this film. And like I said in my Monsters Inc. review, I do hope we can get back to the theaters soon, and I said it earlier too. My most anticipated film this year is Halloween Kills. I want to see that movie, and if they delay it, I'm gonna be a little upset, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, delay it a month, delay it 6 months, delay it a year. If you delay it a year, I'm gonna have an issue because I've waited 2 years for it. Alright. Luckily, like I said, Onward was put onto Disney Plus, so without further ado, this was a fun movie. It was so much fun to watch. The voice acting from Pratt and Holland is wonderful, while not surprising because they're both great in everything they're in. Speaking of great, once again, Octavia Spencer is always a delight to hear, see, whatever it may be. She has a small role in the Rob Zombie Halloween, I think it's the first one. Even in that, it's like, oh my god, she's giving it her all. And she gets stabbed like 12 times in her back. I mean, it's aggressive, just over and over from Michael. I mean, it's insane. But she's still giving an Oscar-worthy performance. And of course, The Help is probably one of her more popular movies. I cannot remember if she's in Hidden Figures, so let's look that up. Hidden Figures. I feel like she would be. Let's see. Where is cast? There's cast. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Obviously, like I said, I didn't want to make assumptions because I've never seen Hidden Figures. The plot is nice. Ian and Barley, they're trying to bring back their dad from the dead. Now, they only get a day with him, and unfortunately, the spell is messed up, so you only have his lower half, and they have to get a Phoenix Gem to fix what they've done. Pixar is always great at coming up with these kind of outlandish plots and making them very much entertaining, and I think Monsters Inc. is a prime example of that. This is definitely. Now, I know about the whole Pixar theory and how they all directly relate to each other because of a timeline with starting with Brave and ending with, or starting with The Good Dinosaur, excuse me, and ending with Monsters Inc. or Brave, depending on which way you think about it. I believe I did watch a video on it, and I don't personally know enough about the Pixar theory, I just know of it. I think this kind of starts a new timeline. It's kind of weird because it's more fantastical creatures, but in like a modern, I mean, you see them using modern technology. They drive cars, they have phones, they go to school, and so it doesn't exactly take place during any timeline of Brave. It could be far in the future. I believe that was part of it, is that it takes place after WALL-E. I don't know all about that, like I said. The film actually goes by at a very smooth pace, and it feels like there's a natural progression of the events happening. This is what Pixar is good at, is just progressing what's going on in the movie instead of, here's an issue, alright, yep, that's it, that's all I got for you. No, they're like, here's the problem, here are multiple solutions, now the characters have to figure out which one it is. You may know which one's obvious, but to them, they don't know yet, so they gotta figure it out. They don't necessarily go for the one that you might say is, hey, that's the obvious one. They're gonna go for the one like, sneak around the bend, jump across the creek, when you could be like, yeah, there's a straight shot right there. But Pixar lets its characters learn instead of just being like, yeah, they're smart, they're intelligent, they know what they're doing. They're trying to set these stories for people who like, they're trying to set these stories for kids to learn and stuff. The film delves into something at the climax, though, that kind of hits home for me, though. And it's a moment, Barley says his final memory of his father was walking into the hospital and seeing his dad hooked up to a bunch of tubes and wires. And that's, whenever he thinks of his dad, that's what he thinks of. Sadly, I do have a relatable story. when I was about 7 or 8, my grandmother was diagnosed with lung cancer, and she did not make it much further after that. I remember walking in, seeing her hooked up to all these tubes, and immediately walking out. And, being that I was 8, nowadays I think about my grandmother, that's what comes to mind. Even now, my other grandmother, she died when I was 15. Even at that point, those are sadly the things that come to memory for me. With my other grandmother, the one I said died at 15, or when I was 15, there are memories I have with her that do come to mind, but that one comes a lot more. The grandmother who passed away when I was 8, all I can say is there's like one or two, and then that. And unfortunately, that's what comes to mind. So I know what Barley is going through. And Ian, he's too young to he was too young when their father died to know what happened to have those memories. And he actually kind of uses that. Well, Barley, you have all these memories with Dad. And that's when he says, no, I do, but let me tell you what comes to mind. And it makes Barley a more relatable character from my end. And, it oddly fits with his character in Guardians of the Galaxy. Because, and if you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy, you know that in that movie, he witnesses his mom die from cancer. And in this, their father, it's not, I don't remember if it's outright said, but it's heavily implied that it's cancer. So it's like, is that just the characters he plays? From when he played in Parks and Rec, there was no real mention of his parents. When he plays Owen Grady in the Jurassic World movies, there's no real mention of his parents. I know he's in other stuff, but those are the ones that come to mind. Those are his more popular works. So it's like, is that what your character? Is that just your natural character? And did this happen to you in real life? I don't know, but it is kind of depressing and sad, but also interesting that he easily relates to most people who have seen things. Now, no, I've never lost a parent, thankfully, but even losing a grandparent, you kind of see the similarities. Actually, you know what? It's the same thing that when my grandfather died too. I was 5. I have one other memory of my grandfather besides seeing him with a tube, after his heart attack. And it's crazy to think that those are the kinds of memories people like me have of their grandparents. So if you are my age and your grandparents are maybe in their 50s or 60s, count yourself lucky that you will have those memories when you're older. Because there are those of us who don't. Now, my other grandfather, he's 95 years old. So I have lots of memories with him, and I'm thankful for that. But it sounds like from Barley's perspective that, yeah, he had memories of his father, but that's the one that overshadows. And I just think it's more, from my standpoint, I can relate to I have memories, but this is the one that stands out standpoint. So the climax of the film feels like every fantasy movie ever. There's a giant dragon. Of course there is. Why wouldn't there be? It's dope as hell, though. Even though it's made out of concrete slabs and a curse, and the face of it is the school logo, which is a dragon with its tongue sticking out, making a silly face. I don't care about that. It's epic. It's fucking dope. There is a giant dragon. The ending is actually truly heartwarming and sad, too, at the same time. I recommend you watch the movie. My only issue is that it's slightly predictable. And we'll talk about that when I talk about Coco. I have this issue when I watch Pixar movies that I kind of can see where they're going. Yeah, I'm an adult watching a kid's movie, and that's probably obvious that you can predict where these movies are headed based on just anything. So, from my standpoint, it's a little too predictable. I knew, and I don't think this was ever pointed out in the trailers for the movie. I don't I think I watched one, and then that was it. It's it's like, yeah, it's a fantasy movie. There's gonna be a giant dragon. Hello, have you seen Harry Potter? Have you seen The Hobbit? I have. So yes, there's a giant dragon, and it's awesome. I'm not gonna talk about the ending though, because there are fewer people who haven't seen Onward versus Monsters Inc. or Inside Out or Coco. Um, and actually, when I was watching Coco, I saw it in theaters. I believe that was the second Pixar movie I'd ever seen in third? I don't know. I think it was maybe actually the third Pixar movie I'd seen in theaters. And I was sitting there with who I went with, and they were getting mad because every time I was like, I'll bet you that this is gonna happen. 10 seconds later, it happened. So I'm like, am I good, or are these movies just highly predictable? I have to say they're highly predictable. But again, I'm a 21-year-old watching a movie made for a 5-year-old. So in a 5-year-old's mind, the fact that there is a giant dragon at the end blows their mind. When you're 21, you're like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fantasy movie trope at this point. So no, it shouldn't bother me at all. But again, I recommend this, and I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. Just because I'm holding it to that whole predictability thing. And yeah, I mean, again, I know I'm an adult watching a kid's movie, and it's definitely super good. I don't know why people have issues with this movie. Um, at least it's not another sequel, and that's really all I've got for it. And last year in 2019, trying to think. I think Toy Story 4 was the only Pixar movie to come out in 2019. Let's Google that too. Pixar 2019. Yeah, Toy Story 4 was the only movie not that came out in 2019. Now, of course, 2020, we got Onward, and we're supposed to get Soul, and it's still marked as November 20th for this year, so it hasn't been delayed yet. I didn't lie to you guys. Let me know in the comments section if I'm wrong in 2 weeks. That'll really, really help. So I talked about the fact that I ranked the 2020 films that I saw before lockdown over on Instagram. I am going to translate that into a video in a couple of weeks. Since next week is DC week, we did have a DCEU film released in 2020. It was called Birds of Prey, and I did pick that up today, so you can bet you'll see a review for it next week. And then the following 2 weeks, I'll do Invisible Man and Sonic the Hedgehog. I believe Sonic the Hedgehog actually comes out on Blu-ray next week at some point, and the Invisible Man is the same thing, so it'll all work out well. And I gotta tell you, I only saw Invisible Man once in theaters, and I want to watch it again so that I can gather more thoughts on it. And that's what's easier about watching movies at home versus the theater is, yeah, I can still talk about it from what I remember. I have to take down notes after the movie because I don't want to be that jerk on their phone. But that's just me. So, until we do some of those things I've talked about, and until tomorrow when we talk about Inside Out, I'm Luke, and I will see you guys tomorrow.